Samaras, for getting the Greek presidency off to such a cracking start. Your overnight successful negotiation in the trialogue on MiFID, I'm sure, will have them dancing in the streets of Athens. No matter that your country, very poorly advised by Goldman Sachs, joined a currency that it was never suited to. No matter that 30% are unemployed, that 60% of youth are unemployed, that a neo-Nazi party is on the march, that there was a terrorist attack on the German embassy. No, don't worry about all that, because the trialogue on MiFID has been a success. And in many ways, it sums up the two Europes. The Europe that's talked about in here by the dreamers, who want to impose a new United States of Europe with an identity and a currency, and the real world out there. And you come here, Mr. Samaras, and you tell us that you represent the sovereign will of the Greek people. Well, I'm sorry, but you're not in charge of Greece. And I suggest you rename and rebrand your party. It's called New Democracy. I suggest you call it No Democracy, because Greece is now under foreign control. You can't make any decisions. You've been bailed out and you've surrendered democracy, the thing your country invented in the first place. And you can't admit that joining the euro was a mistake, because of course Mr. Papandreou did that, didn't he? He even said there should be a referendum in Greece. And within 48 hours, the unholy trinity that now run this European Union had him removed and replaced by an ex-Goldman Sachs employee puppet. We are run now by big business, big banks, and in the shape of Mr. Barroso, big bureaucrats. And actually, that's what these European elections are really going to be all about. It's going to be a battle of national democracy versus EU state bureaucracy. Whatever you may say in this chamber, the people out there don't want a United States of Europe. They want a Europe of sovereign states trading and working together. And I believe the European elections are going to mark a watershed. Up until now, everybody has thought, much as they may not like the development of the European Union, that it was inevitable. That myth of inevitability will be shattered for the European elections this year. Thank you. Well, good morning. I know it's seasonal to talk about the 12 days of Christmas, but I want to talk about the 21-day countdown to the opening of the doors to 29 million poor people from Romania and Bulgaria. It does, I think, mark a pivotal moment in British politics. Now, very often in Britain, MEPs complain that they haven't got a high enough profile with the public, and I want to try and change that today, because Brigadier Geoffrey Van Orden, sitting behind me here, British Conservative, was the rapporteur, the sponsor for Bulgaria joining the European Union, and for us having a total open door to all of those people. So well done, Brigadier. And I want all the British people to know who you are and what your achievements are. And of course, what free movement means, it means free health care, it means free education, it means free access to the benefit system, it means an open door to the criminal gangs and the modern day Fagins, who will of course benefit from the fact that London is the most successful and wealthy international city in Europe. Already the situation is so bad that 92% of ATM crime in London last year was committed by Romanians. Now look, I am not scapegoating in any way, and I know that a lot of people that come from Bulgaria and Romania will be very decent people who want to work hard and want to better their lives. But free movement doesn't work in a European Union now that we have countries that are poor. A man that comes from Bucharest and works in London and gets child benefit for the 2 children back home, that child benefit is worth more than he can actually earn doing a menial job in Bucharest. And that is the reason why the numbers that come to Britain will indeed be absolutely enormous. Now, I've said for some time, and now the British people agree, enough is enough. 80% of the British people do not want those borders to come down in 21 days' time. It's unfair. It's unfair on working people. It is leading to lower wages. It is leading to higher youth unemployment, and it is leading to divided communities. But of course it doesn't end here, because our Prime Minister, Mr Cameron, with the full support of Labour and the Lib Dems, now wants to extend this principle of open borders, as he says himself, from the Atlantic to the Urals. So it means countries like Kazakhstan, indeed the Ukraine, joining the European Union. I see that Tony Blair is now helping Albania join the European Union. Well, good luck to them with that. We even want to extend it to Turkey joining the European Union. Well, our message is that a Turkey is just for Christmas. It's not for political union. We don't want open borders. And Mr Cameron, do not next week at the summit surrender in any way to deeper European military integration. Many in this room would have bombed Syria had Europe had that capability. Thank God it did not. On open doors, on European armies, the voters will have their say next May, and I think there is going to be a radical change. I think there's going to be an earthquake in British politics next May. Thank you. Odd man out. I mean, to me it's beyond parody that the Greek finance minister, Mr Koukoulas, can come along here and tell us our fortune. The policies are bearing fruit. We're going to tackle unemployment, and no one says anything. No, because of course everybody here is tied up with the same obsession. The obsession that the euro must and will work. The obsession that you'll use the crisis to build a United States of Europe. What you could have told them, Mr Koukoulas, is that according to the respected medical journal The Lancet, there are now 800,000 people in Greece without access to welfare or medical care. You could have told them that. But even if you had, they wouldn't have listened. So obsessed are they with building the euro. OK, simple lesson in economics. When you have two countries that are completely at different stages of the economic cycle, one currency needs to devalue. But if those countries are pegged or tied inside the same currency and they cannot devalue, you have to devalue the country. And that is what is happening to the Mediterranean. We are devaluing the Mediterranean, and it's leading towards third world status. No amount of socialist state spending can mend this imbalance, and it's about time, if people here cared for the citizens of Europe, particularly in the south, that we admitted the euro doesn't work for southern Europe, and it's time we broke it up and gave countries currencies that reflected their current economic status. Thank you.
Señor Farage, tiene... Perdón.
Mr. Lamberts would like to put a question to Mr. Farage. Would you like to take that question? Yes, Philip, you have 30 seconds.
I think many things you said make a lot of sense. Internal devaluation in a currency union is inevitable if there are no transfers. Now, would you then, applying the same reasoning to the United Kingdom, say that if the economic cycle of Wales or Scotland or Northern Ireland are different, then, well, probably the best solution would be to dissolve the currency union and to then leave each part of the current union live its own life, eventually with devaluation, monetary devaluation, instead to solve these asymmetries.
Gracias, Philip. Señor Farage.
Thank you, Philip. Mr. Farage.
Late Eddie George, Governor of the Bank of England, made. He said it's tough enough to have an interest rate that works for Newcastle and London, let alone to have one that works across the whole of Europe. So there is a valid economic argument. However, the taxpayers in London do not object strongly to transfers going to Newcastle or Scotland or wherever they may be needed, because we're part of the same country. And the problem you've got with the Eurozone is not just this huge economic imbalance between North and South, but that increasingly the taxpayers of the North do not want to go on subsidising the South, because there is no sense of European identity. We are very different countries. Well, even by the standards of this place, today's atmosphere has been leaden. You know, a great global political leader, Mr Barroso, comes along, and out of 750 members, 44 people turn up to listen. Why is that? Well, I've noticed something. I've been here 15 years, but in the last 5 years, something really big has changed. The European dream is crumbling, absolutely crumbling. There are a few maniacs in the front row here and in your commission who, of course, still want a United States of Europe, but actually out there in the member states they don't, and most of the MEPs here, yeah, they want a job, yes, they want to get re-elected, but the enthusiasm for this project is dying. Why? Well, you've made two big mistakes. The first mistake was, of course, to extend the Eurozone. It would have been okay had it been just Germany and a few northern European countries, but to bring the Mediterranean in to the Eurozone has been a disaster. And the second mistake was to allow the free movement of peoples to southern and to eastern Europe. You know, we in the United Kingdom, who've been the most open country with regards to immigration of any European country through a history that has lasted hundreds of years, now have 4,000 migrants a week that come to Britain from the European Union and stay for a year or more. And these are the two realities that have hit home to people. The EU doesn't work economically, and open door migration is fundamentally changing societies in ways that people don't want. And to listen to the economics. Mr Barroso, you talked today about the possibility of an industrial renaissance in Europe, which sounded good. Lighter touch regulation, all very encouraging. And then you say, but we must pursue our climate change carbon targets. The Americans have gone for shale gas and reduced energy prices. The Chinese are digging up coal in quantities we can't fathom and building just their 2 coal-fired power stations every week. This policy of economic unilateralism on climate change, that's what's destroying jobs in Europe, and the electors are going to have a chance in 72 days' time to give their verdict. I suspect the next European Parliament will be very much more exciting than this one's been this morning.
Frau McGuinness, bitte.
Ms McGuinness.
Mr Farage, I hope you will answer my question, please. You talk about excitement in politics and a leaden debate. With the greatest of respect, I don't want excitement in politics. I want people who work. Will you please commit to stay in this chamber and listen with respect to the responses of those who will be here? Your practice in the past has been to walk out. And could I say that you say that the enthusiasm for the EU is dimming? I think enthusiasm for UKIP is dimming.
Well, had there been a proper question there, I might try to answer it. Euroscepticism is growing right across the European Union. Nobody here, not even the maniacs that believe in the project, would question that. It's coming in all shapes and forms. It's on the right, it's in the centre, and it's on the left. And the reason, of course, and you come from Ireland, so you should know better than anybody, the reason, of course, is that actually no one's ever given consent for a political European Union. The French clearly, followed by the Dutch, rejected the Constitution, and they rebranded it as the Lisbon Treaty, and only one country had a referendum on that. That was Ireland, and the people of Ireland rejected it. So you can't tell me there is popular support for a United States of Europe. Mrs Reding may believe it, Mr Barroso may believe it, 1 or 2 in the front row may believe it, but the peoples of Europe don't believe it. Thank you. In introduction, you said that the First World War was an industrial war. And indeed, you've only got to drive 2 hours up the A4 from here and visit the battlefield at Verdun to see exactly what you were talking about. For those that haven't visited, I think it's probably the grimmest battlefield I've certainly visited on the Western Front, or indeed anywhere in the world. And it was something that had such a huge psychological effect on France that it very much dominated the thinking of Monet and Schumann post-1945, that this awful thing must never happen again. And those of us in politics will all remember the rather famous photograph of quite a large German Chancellor Kohl and a rather small French President Mitterrand holding hands, standing in front of that ossuary at Douaumont. And so the whole European project comes from the disaster that was sparked by the First World War, and it is entirely understandable that people should have sought ways to prevent such awfulness. The difficulty is that they chose the wrong target. Monet and Schumann decided, and it's shared today by Mr Barroso and the Cohn-Bendits and others, they decided that it was the existence of nation-state that led to war, and therefore we have to abolish nation-state. Actually, what we should have focused on post-1945 isn't the abolition of states, it's to make sure that the European states were democratic, because democratic nation-states do not go to war with each other. So I have to say that I believe the whole European project is based on a falsehood, and it's potentially a dangerous falsehood, because if you try to impose a new flag, a new anthem, a new president, a new army, police force, foreign policy, whatever else, if you try to impose that without first seeking the consent of the people, you're in danger actually of creating the very nationalisms and resentment that you sought to snuff out in the first place. We've done this all before. We did it after the First World War in the Balkans. We said we can't have all these little Balkan states going around fighting with each other. Let's bring them together. Let's give them one flag, one anthem, one president, and let's call it Yugoslavia. And it led to horrific wars since 1990, the deaths of tens of thousands of people as people have fought to get out of a false state. The European Union is making a very similar mistake because there is no consent for this project. I've heard people this morning talking about the need for a United States of Europe on a federal model. You can only have that if people give consent for it, and nobody has. And when you put the Constitution to the peoples of Europe, the first time you really come clean with the electors, they rejected it. I'm not against Europe, but I'm against this Europe. I want a Europe of independent, sovereign nation states that trade together, that work together, that cooperate together, and I believe the European elections this year will mark a turning point. The tide is turning. You're backing an outdated model that seeks to get rid of a problem that actually hasn't existed since 1945.